The word came down the corridor the way bad news always travels in a palace, not shouted, but carried hand to hand, candle to candle, until the flame of it reached us at the great door of the king's wing, and we knew, before anyone said it, that the old man inside was dying. I was 23 that winter, and I had stood many posts, but never that one. Sergeant Edmund Carr had stood it for 40 years. He was at my shoulder when the understeward came up the stairs with his lantern shaking, and I felt Carr go still beside me the way a tall tree goes still before a storm, not from fear, but from a kind of gathering. The steward stopped 2 paces off, looked at the sergeant's face, and could not make his mouth work. He did not have to. Carr had already squared himself a half-inch taller, and that half-inch told me everything. The king would not see the morning. How long, Carr said, it was not a question. With him very little ever was. The physicians say before dawn, the steward managed. They have done what can be done. He is asking for quiet and for the curtains drawn, and he stopped. He asked who stands the door. Tell him Carr stands the door, the sergeant said. The steward went in. We heard the murmur of it, and then a sound I will carry to my grave, the old king's voice, thin as paper now but still his own, saying, "Then I am in good hands," and a dry rattle that might once have been a laugh. Let me tell you about Caldon Palace as it was that night, before the gas lamps came and changed everything, when the whole vast house ran on candle and oil, and the patient hands of men who never slept. The king's wing was the oldest part of it, stone laid down by kings whose names had gone soft in the histories, and the corridor outside his bedchamber was a long gallery hung with the portraits of his line, all of them looking down at the 2 of us in the wavering light, as if they had come to wait as well. At the far end, a single tall window held back the dark. The cold came through it the way water finds a crack. We stood the door, Carr and I, one to each side, and between us was the threshold no man would cross that night without the sergeant's leave. I want to be honest about myself, because this is a story about honor, and I will not begin it with a lie. I did not want to be there. I was young, and I was afraid not of the dark, not of the dead, but of doing it wrong. A man can drill the manual of arms until his hands know it in their sleep. There is no drill for standing 6 feet from a king while he dies and keeping your face a wall. I had polished my buttons until they threw back the candlelight. It did not help. My heart went like a drum, and I was sure Carr could hear it. "Steady, boy," he said, without turning his head. His voice came out of the side of his mouth, low, the way the old hands learned to speak on a post where speaking is forbidden. "He is not dying any faster for your worrying. And you are not standing this door for him." That turned me cold, Sergeant. "You think you stand it for the king." A long pause while the candle nearest him guttered and steadied. "You stand it for what the king is. There's a difference, and tonight you'll learn it, or you'll never learn it at all." I did not understand him then. I would before the night was out. A clock somewhere deep in the palace struck 11, the strokes coming up through the stone into the soles of my boots. The physicians came and went on soft shoes, their faces gray, carrying basins and cloths and the small, useless instruments of their trade. Each time the door opened, I caught a wedge of the room beyond, a great curtained bed, a fire banked low, and in the bed a shape so small it shamed me, because the king I had saluted on 100 mornings had filled a doorway, had filled a throne, had filled the whole idea I had of what a king was. The thing in the bed was a tired old man with white hair on the pillow, and his hands folded on the counterpane like a child saying its prayers. I felt Carr watching me take it in. "He was a big man once," he said quietly, "bigger than you. I carried his colors when he was 30 and I was 40, and there wasn't a horse in the cavalry could throw him." The corner of his mouth moved just barely. "He threw me once on purpose, to see if I'd hold my temper. I held it. And he made you a sergeant." "He made me hold the temper," Carr said. "The rank came after. The rank always comes after." He let that sit a moment. "Remember that the next time a man with a fine coat and no manners tries to make you forget what you are, you don't hold for the rank. You hold because holding is the thing itself." The door opened again. This time it was the Queen. I had never been so near her. She was a small woman, smaller than the rumors, in a dark gown with her hair down for the first time in any of our seeing, and her eyes were red but dry. She had done her weeping somewhere we could not hear it, which is its own kind of strength. She stopped in the doorway and looked at the sergeant, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. Then she did something I have never seen a queen do before or since. She reached out and laid her hand flat against the breast of Car's tunic, over the heart, the way you would steady a man, or thank one, or both. "He says you are to go in," she said. "He wants to see you while he can still see." I watched the sergeant's face do a thing I did not have a word for then and barely have one now. It did not crumple. It did not soften. It went, for one instant, utterly open, a door swinging wide in a house that had been shut for 40 years, and then it closed again, sealed soldierly, and he said, "Ma'am, I am on post." Edmund, she used his given name. I did not know until that moment that she knew it. "He is the king. He is ordering you." And Carr said the thing that I have repeated to young guardsmen for the rest of my life, because it is the whole of what we are, said in 9 words by a man who never wasted one. Then let his last order be one I keep. He did not move. He stood the door. The Queen looked at him a long moment more. Whatever she saw there, she stopped arguing with it. She turned and went back inside, and through the closing gap I heard her say low, "He will not come, my love. He says he is on post." And I heard the old king, that paper voice, say something that made her make a sound that was half a sob and half a laugh, and the door shut, and I stood there not breathing, certain I had just watched the sergeant defy a dying king, and not knowing whether I had witnessed the greatest loyalty of my life or the greatest cruelty. It was neither. I just didn't have the eyes for it yet. The clock struck the half-hour. The cold came through the window, and down the long gallery where the dead kings hung watching, I heard the first of the footsteps that would test everything Carr had ever taught me about the door that must not be crossed. The man who came up the gallery walked the way men walk when they have never in their lives been told no. He was richly dressed even at midnight, a long coat of dark velvet, a heavy ring on his hand that caught the candlelight, boots that had never touched a parade ground. I knew him by sight. Lord Hessen, a cousin of the crown, a man whose name was spoken in the same breath as money and ambition and very little else. Behind him came a clerk with a leather folio clutched to his chest, and behind the clerk 2 of Hessen's own liveried men, soft-footed and watchful. He made straight for the door. He made straight for me because I was younger, and the young are mistaken for the soft. "Stand aside," Hessen said. He did not slow down. He expected the door to open the way doors had opened before him his whole life, by themselves, by the labor of lesser men who melted out of his path. I did not stand aside. I brought my rifle across, but to the stone, the barrel a level bar between him and the threshold, and I said the words we are given for exactly this and no other purpose. "No one passes, my lord, by the king's own order." He stopped then. He looked at me as though a piece of the furniture had spoken. "Boy, do you know who I am?" "I know who is behind this door, my lord. That is the only name that matters tonight." I felt rather than saw Carr shift his weight, not toward me, not to rescue me, but to watch. He was letting me have it. He was letting me find out whether I had the thing or whether I only had the buttons. My mouth had gone dry as ash. Hessen's clerk stepped up and opened the folio with the eager hands of a man who lives to produce documents. "We have business with His Majesty that cannot wait. Successions are settled in the last hours, soldier. Estates, titles. A signature now is worth a kingdom in a week." He turned a page toward me as if I could read the law of it by candlelight, as if the law were the point. "The king will want to see this set right while his mind is clear." So that was it. They had come for a signature. They had come to lean on the hand of a dying man and guide the pen, and they had timed it for the dark hours when they thought only a boy and an old man stood between them and a fortune. The cold in that gallery was nothing to the cold that went through me then. "My lord," I said, and I am proud the words came out level, "the king is not receiving." "The king," said Hessen, "will receive his own blood." He stepped forward and put his gloved hand flat on my rifle and pushed, testing, the way a man tests a fence he means to climb. That was when Carr spoke, and the whole gallery seemed to lean in to listen. "Take your hand off the corporal's weapon, my lord." He had not raised his voice. He never raised his voice. But there was a quality in it I had not heard before, a thing that had been forged a long time ago in places this perfumed cousin had never been, and it stopped Hessen's hand as surely as if Carr had laid iron on it. "That weapon is the king's. So is the door. So am I. You'll not put your glove on any of the three." Hessen turned to him, and his face had gone an ugly color in the candlelight. "Sergeant Carr, I had heard you were still alive. 40 years a doorman, 40 years and not a step higher, while men with sense made their fortunes." He smiled, and it was the smile of a man reaching for the soft place. "You could be a captain of an estate by morning, a pension that would let you die warm instead of standing in a draft. All it costs you is to look the other way for the time it takes a sick man to sign his name. He'll never know. He'll be dead by dawn." I will tell you what I expected. I expected the sergeant to be angry. I had seen the line of his jaw, and I braced for the storm. The storm did not come. What came was worse for Hessen, and I did not understand why until much later. Carr laughed. It was a low sound, almost gentle, and it had 40 years of the man in it. "You think you've offered me something," he said. "A captaincy. A warm death. You poor, hungry man. I have stood at this door through 3 of his fevers and the loss of his son, and the night they thought the cavalry was broken, and the morning we learned it wasn't. I have stood here while he laughed and while he wept, and while he was wrong and would not be told. There is nothing behind this door you can give me, because everything I have ever wanted to be near is behind it already. You came to buy a man who has been paid in full for 40 years. Go home, my lord. You've nothing in your purse I haven't already got." For a moment Hessen could not speak. Then the soft place in him hardened, the way it does in men who have always won, and he drew himself up. "You will regret this," he said. "When the new reign comes, and it comes within hours, there will be a reckoning for old men who forgot their place." He snapped his fingers at the clerk. "Note the sergeant's name. Note the boy's." "It's Carr," the sergeant said pleasantly. "2 R's. The boy is Corporal Tam Ferris. Spell us right. We'll want it spelled right when they read out who stood the door the night the old king died." He paused, and the next words he set down one at a time, like a man laying stones. "Now you will take your 2 bravos and your clerk and your folio, and you will walk back down that gallery the way you came, past every king of this house who is hanging there watching you try to rob the last one. And you will do it before I call the watch, and have it remembered that a cousin of the crown laid hands on the king's own rifle at his deathbed door." The 2 liveried men were already drifting backward. They were servants, and servants know which way the weather is turning before their masters do. Hessen stood his ground 1 heartbeat longer, and then the portraits or the sergeant or his own thin courage decided it for him. He turned. He walked away down the long gallery under the painted eyes of all those dead kings, and his velvet coat did not look so fine going as it had coming, and the clerk scuttled after with the folio shut. When the gallery was empty again, I found that I had been holding my rifle so hard my hands ached. I eased the butt down to the stone. My whole body was shaking, and I was furious at it for shaking. "Sergeant," I whispered, "he'll do it. The reckoning, when the new king comes, he'll try." Carr was looking down the empty gallery as though he could still see the man. "Listen to me, Tam, because this is the lesson, and there won't be a better night to learn it. A man like that thinks the door is a thing you hold to keep him out. It isn't. The door is a thing you hold to keep yourself in the place where you said you'd stand, no matter who comes, no matter what they offer, no matter what it costs you after." He finally turned and looked at me full on, and his old face in the candlelight was the kindest hard thing I ever saw. He offered me a warm death. I would rather stand at this cold door than sit at his warm fire because I know what I'm worth and he never will. That's the whole of it. That's the only fortune we've got. Don't ever let a rich man talk you out of it. The clock struck midnight. Behind the door, very faint, I heard the Queen begin, softly, to sing. It was an old song, a country song, the kind a nurse sings to a feverish child. She had the door cracked an inch, perhaps so the physicians could come quick, perhaps so the corridor would not feel so far from the room, and the thread of her voice came out into the cold and wound around the two of us standing there in the dark. The king was past speech by then, or nearly. But a man can hear when he can no longer answer, and she knew it, and she sang him down the way you would sing anyone down, not a queen and a king, just a wife walking her husband as far as she was allowed to walk, and not one step further. I had thought the hard part of that night would be men like Hessen. I was wrong. The hard part was the singing. There is no drill for a man's eyes wanting to fill while he stands a post, and I learned that night that you do not fight it by clenching. You let it stand in your eyes, and you do not let it fall, and you keep your spine, and you keep your front, and you go on holding the door while your face does the impossible thing of grieving and guarding at once. I looked across at Carr to see how he managed it. He was not managing it. He was simply doing it. 40 years had burned the trick so deep into him that there was no effort left to see. He stood like the stone of the wall behind him, and only the smallest gleam at the corner of his eye told me he was a man at all, and not the statue Hessen had taken him for. "Sergeant," I said very low, when the song had ended and the only sound was the fire shifting behind the door, "may I ask you a thing?" "Ask." "Why does it have to be unbroken? The watch, we could spell each other. We could take it in turns to rest a leg, to warm our hands. He'd never know. The Queen would never tell. Why must one of us stand every minute of it without a break, all the night through?" He was quiet so long I thought he would not answer. When he did, his voice had gone somewhere far back, to a place I think he did not often visit. "There was a night a long time ago," he said. "Long before you. The young king, he was young then, younger than I am now by half, took a wound at the river crossing that everyone said would kill him. Everyone. The physicians the same as now, gray faces, basins, before dawn talk. And I was a corporal like you, and I stood his tent. And the captain over me, a clever man, a kind man, he said the same as you've just said. He said, 'Carr, the man's unconscious, he'll never know, spell yourself, sit down, you're no use to anyone fainting on your feet.' And it made sense. Everything that's wrong always makes sense at the time." He drew a slow breath. "So I sat, one time, just the once. I sat on a camp stool 10 feet from the tent flap, and I closed my eyes for what I swear to you was a minute. And in that minute a man came through the dark who had not come to nurse the king." The cold in the gallery seemed to deepen. "What happened?" I said. "The king lived," Carr said. "Not because of me, despite me. The man with the knife was clumsy, and the king, half dead as he was not a man who died easy, and there were others who came running. But I was on the stool. When it was over and the king was breathing and the camp was an uproar, he looked across all of it and he found me, on the stool with my eyes only just open, and he didn't say a word. He never said a word about it, not that night, not in 40 years. That was the worst of it. He forgave me before I could even ask, and a man can carry a forgiveness like that a great deal further than a punishment." He turned his head and looked at the door, at the inch of warm light leaking out of it. "So I made him a promise he never asked for and never knew I'd made. I told myself, while I have legs to stand on, no door of his will ever again be held by a man who is sitting down. Not for a minute, not for a breath, unbroken." He said the last word the way another man might say a prayer. "That's why it has to be unbroken, Tam, not because of the rule. The rule is just where the crown wrote down a thing it learned the hard way. It has to be unbroken because the one time it broke, a king nearly died 10 feet from a sleeping fool, and the fool was me, and I have been 40 years paying a debt to a man who told me I owed him nothing." His jaw worked once. Tonight I pay the last of it, and I will pay it standing. I have stood many vigils since. I have trained boys of my own and told them this story, and I have watched it do to them what it did to me. Straighten the spine, settle the breath, turn a duty into a thing they would die before they'd drop. But I have never again heard a man explain the whole of honor in the time it takes a candle to burn down a finger's width, and I doubt I ever will. The night wore on. The clock struck 1 and 2. The cold grew teeth. The physicians came less often now, and their faces had stopped pretending. Once the queen came out into the gallery for air. She could not breathe in there, I think, with the weight of it, and she stood between us a while saying nothing, and then she said to no one, to both of us, "He keeps asking, is the door held?" Over and over. His mind goes and comes back, and the first thing it asks each time is whether the door is held. She looked at Carr. I tell him yes. I tell him Carr stands the door, and he settles, every time, whatever else slips that holds him. The door is held. It's held, ma'am, Carr said. I know it is. She pressed her lips together hard. He says when his mind is clear, he says the strangest thing. He says a king can be robbed of everything but the men who won't be bought, and that he dies a rich man because of 2 soldiers in a cold hall. Her voice did not break, but it bent. He counted you, Corporal. He counted you among the men who won't be bought. You, who he's never spoken to in his life. I could not answer her. I had no words that would have stayed inside my throat. She went back in, and somewhere past 2, in the deepest trough of the night, came the second test, not a rich man this time, but the one that broke better soldiers than me. It came as kindness, which is how the hard tests always come. The captain of the watch came up the gallery, Captain Vance, a good officer, a fair one, a man Carr had soldiered beside in younger days. He had 2 fresh guardsmen with him, scrubbed and rested, their buttons cold bright. He stopped before the sergeant, and he did the kindest, most reasonable thing in the world, and it was very nearly the cruelest. Edmund, he said, you've held it 5 hours. You're 63 years old, and you've been on your feet since the noon guard. I've brought you relief. Go and sit by a fire for 1 hour. Eat something. Let these 2 stand it. You've earned an hour by any measure a man could name. I watched the sergeant, and for the first time that night I saw the cost of what he was doing written plain on him. His face had gone gray under the candlelight, the gray of the physicians' faces, and there was a tremor in his left hand he had been hiding against his thigh, and I understood with a lurch that he was not standing this watch the way I was, on young legs that merely ached. He was standing it on an old body that was failing him by the hour, and he had been failing it right back, refusing it all night long by an act of will I could not begin to measure. Thank you, Captain, Carr said. No. Edmund. You'd relieve me out of kindness, John, and I love you for it. He used the captain's name, and the 2 old soldiers looked at each other a moment across 40 years. But hear what you're asking. You're asking me to be the man who, on the one night it mattered most, the night his king was dying, came off the door for an hour by the fire. You're asking me to be that man for the rest of my life. His gray face did not waver. I'd sooner you shot me on this spot, John, and I mean that as a soldier and a friend. Leave your 2 lads. They can stand the gallery and learn how it's done. But the door is mine until it isn't needed, and we both know when that will be. Captain Vance looked at him a long moment. Then he did a thing that told me what kind of man he was. He came to attention, a captain before a sergeant, and he held the salute, the regulation, 3 seconds, and he said, "The door is the sergeant's." And he posted his 2 fresh men down the gallery to watch the approaches, and he himself took up a place along the wall, not to relieve Carr but to witness him, and there he stayed. So the watch did not break, but the body inside the watch was breaking, and I was the only one near enough to see it. Past 3, the king began to go. We heard it through the cracked door, the change in the breathing, the long pauses where no breath came at all, and then the ragged, dragging one that did, each gap a little longer than the last. The physicians were all in there now. The Queen's voice, very low, never stopping. And the sergeant beside me had stopped being gray and gone a color I have no name for, and the tremor was in both his hands now, and his breath was coming short and quick. And I knew the way you know a thing in your body before your mind will say it, that the old man was using himself up, that he was pouring the last of his own strength into the act of remaining upright at that door, that he meant to outlast the king by the width of a single breath, and not one breath more. "Sergeant," I whispered, and my voice was breaking. "Sergeant, let me, just lean on me. No one will see. Lean on me and I'll hold you up and the watch won't break. It'll still be you. I swear it'll still be you, just." "No," it came out of him like the last of the air from a bellows. "If you hold me up, Tam, it's you standing, and it has to be me." His head turned a fraction toward me and his eyes, fever bright now, found mine. "But you can do a thing for me. When it's done, when you hear it's done, you'll know. You'll feel it in the house. The whole house will know the same instant, the way a ship knows it's lost its master. When that comes, you watch me close. There's a last thing I have to do, and I'll have one chance to do it right and not much left to do it with. If I go down before it's done, you finish it for me. Promise me. You finish it for him." "I promise," I said. "What is it? What do I finish?" "You'll know it when you see it begin," he said. "It's the oldest thing we do. You've drilled it 1,000 times and never once meant it. Tonight you'll mean it." His hand found my arm, gripped it, and there was almost no strength left in the grip. "Stand up straight, Corporal Ferris. He's nearly home. Let the last thing he could see in this house, if he opened his eyes one more time, be 2 soldiers standing proper at his door." I stood up straight. I have never in my life stood straighter. The cold went out of me and something else came in, something I think a man only feels 2 or 3 times in his years on the earth, and I stood that door beside a dying sergeant outside a dying king, and I was not afraid anymore. The fear had burned off like fog. What was left was the thing Carr had been trying to give me all night, the thing he'd named down at the start. You stand it for what the king is, and now I knew what that meant. Not the man. The promise the man stood for. The thing a whole realm leans against without knowing it leans, the way you lean against a wall in the dark, trusting it to be there. We were the wall. We were the wall in the dark, and the realm was leaning, and it would not find us gone. The breathing past the door stopped, began again, stopped. And then from somewhere over the city, the great bell of the cathedral began to toll, slow, single, the spaces between the strokes enormous. And I understood that they had been waiting for it down there, the bell ringers in their tower, waiting for a signal from a window, and that the signal had been given, and that the old king was dead. The whole house knew the same instant, the way Carr had said it would. I felt it go through the stone, through the portraits, through the cold air of the gallery, a great silence settling, deeper than the one before, the silence of a ship that has lost its master. Somewhere below a woman began to weep and was hushed. The Queen's voice past the door stopped, simply stopped in the middle of a word. And beside me, Sergeant Edmund Carr began to die. I saw it start. His knees went first, the smallest dip, the body finally claiming the debt he had refused it all night long. His face had gone past gray to something white and far away. But even as he sagged, he was straightening. He was fighting his own failing legs back to attention with the last coin in his purse. Because the thing he had to do had come, and he had told me he would have one chance, and here it was, and his body was trying to take it from him. "The last thing," I breathed. "Sergeant, the last thing." "Help me stand," he said. "Just stand, the rest is mine." I put my shoulder under his arm, not holding him up, only steadying, the way you steady a man so that he can do a thing himself, and I felt how little was left of him. And then I watched Edmund Carr do the oldest thing we do, the thing I had drilled 1,000 times and never once meant. He turned to face the door. He brought his heels together. I heard them meet faint, the last clean parade sound of a 40-year soldier. He drew himself to his full height, every inch of it, the gray gone for one impossible moment, the door swinging wide again in the shut house of his face, and this time not closing. And he saluted. He saluted the closed door of his dead king. Slow, not the snap of the parade ground, but slower, the full ceremonial honor, the highest a guardsman has to give, brought up with a hand that shook and held there, held against everything his body was screaming at him, while the cathedral bell tolled over the city and the cold poured through the window and the painted kings looked down. He held the salute for the king who could not see it, for the promise the king had stood for. For 40 years of a cold door, he would rather stand at than sit warm anywhere on earth. And then his strength was simply gone. He did not fall, I will not say he fell. As the salute came down, his legs went out from under him, and I caught him. I caught the whole spent weight of him as gently as I have ever caught anything, and lowered him to the stone with his back against the wall beside the door he had held, and his eyes found mine, and there was no fear in them at all. "You'll finish it," he whispered. "It isn't done. The honor's only half. You finish it for the king and for me both. Stand the door, Tam. Don't let the watch break. Not yet. Not till they carry him." So I stood up. I left him propped against the wall, still breathing, and I took my place at the threshold, and I brought my own heels together. And for the first time in my life I saluted a closed door and meant every fiber of it, saluted a king I had never spoken to, and a sergeant I had known for one night and would love for the rest of my life, and the thing the two of them had taught me in the dark. And I held it, and I did not let the watch break. The door opened. The queen came out. She had heard the heels meet through the door, I think, both times. She had heard the parade sound of it even through her grief. She saw the old sergeant against the wall and the young corporal at the threshold with his hand still at the salute, and she understood all of it in a single look, the way she had understood everything that night. She did not go to her dead husband first. She went to Carr. She knelt down on the cold stone in her dark gown beside the spent old man, and she took his shaking hand in both of hers, and she said, "He heard it, Edmund. He heard your heels come together. At the very last, when nothing else reached him that reached him, he smiled. The last thing my husband did in this world was smile because he heard his sergeant come to attention at the door." She pressed his hand to her cheek. "You held it. You held it the whole night. You never broke." "Never broke, ma'am," Carr said. The smallest smile, 40 years paid in full. He lived 3 more days. The new king, who was a better man than Hessen had gambled on, a son who had been in that room all night and had seen with his own eyes who would be bought and who would not, came himself to the sergeant's bedside, and what passed between them was not for my ears. But I know that Lord Hessen's reckoning never came, and that Hessen himself was quietly sent from the court within the month, his name struck from the rolls of those who might be trusted near the crown, and that the clerk's folio was never seen again. The king said only one thing about it that reached the rest of us, and it went round the regiment like a warming fire, that he had inherited a treasury and a fleet and a crown, but that the richest thing his father had left him was the certain knowledge of which of his men could not be bought, and that he had learned it by the simple act of standing in a dark room and watching a door that would not open. They buried the old king in the cathedral under the bell that had told him out, and the corridors filled with lords and ambassadors and all the great of the realm. But the thing the realm spoke of after, the thing that went out from that palace into every barracks and every guardroom and every cold post in the kingdom and is spoken of still, was not the funeral. It was the night before it. It was the old sergeant who would not come off the door though a king ordered him, and a captain begged him, and a rich man tried to buy him, and his own dying body pleaded with him, who saluted a closed door with the last strength in his arm, and whose heels, coming together in the dark, were the last sound a king ever heard, and the thing that let him go out of the world smiling. A nation that thinks it is moved by crowns and processions learned, that winter, that it is moved far more by one old man keeping a promise no one would have blamed him for breaking. Edmund Carr lies now in a small plot within sight of the palace wall, where a guardsman can salute him on his way to the gate, and many do. They cut nothing grand on the stone. They cut the thing he said to me in the gallery, the whole of what we are in 9 words, and I gave it to them myself, and I have never given a better gift. The door is held. I am an old man now myself. I have stood that door and trained the boys who stand it, and one cold night I will hand it on for the last time. And when I do, I will tell whoever stands beside me what Carr told me, that you do not hold the door to keep the great ones out, but to keep yourself in the place where you said you'd stand, no matter who comes or what they offer or what it costs you after. The buttons can be polished by anyone. The wall in the dark is held by the few. Be one of the few. And when your night comes, and it will come, stand straight and bring your heels together. And let the last thing this house hears from you be a soldier come to attention at a door that must not break. It is held. It was always held. It will be held when I am gone. That is the whole of it. That is the only fortune we've got.